Good morning. Before we call the meeting to order, I would just like to introduce myself. My name is Carla Van Hagen. I'm the Senior Deputy Clerk of the Board for the Board of Supervisors, and I've been asked to assist in clerking these meetings, so I'm very happy to be here. You'll see things are a little different just because I wasn't here before, so if things should be differently laid out, just let me know. I'm happy to change it in the future. Meeting packets and agendas are in the back. If you'd like to speak on any item on the agenda, just if you fill out a speaker card, it will help me get your name correct in the minutes. It's not required, it just helps me to get your spelling correct. And there's also an option on here if you'd like to be included on the distribution list. You can put your email address on there and I can update the distribution list as well. So just wanted to say hi and thank you for having me.
Thank you for doing it.
So would you like to roll call?
Is it you want to open the meeting and then I'll take it?
Okay. She's stuck at the board.
Okay, so this meeting has come to order. It is now 1:01 p.m. and I'll go ahead and take roll. Sheriff Almond.
Here.
CEO Angelo.
Here.
Dr. Barash, Chair Barash.
Here.
Member Diamond.
Here.
Member Liberty.
Here.
Member McGordy.
Here.
Dr. Miller.
Here.
Member Machete.
Muschetti.
Muschetti. Spaghetti.
Like spaghetti.
Got it. See,
Just like
I
spaghetti.
knew it was going to happen. Member Muschetti. Member Riley. Here. And Auditor Weir.
Here. So would anybody in the public like to give an expression?
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I did skip right past you. I apologize. Member Myrtle.
Here.
Thank you.
My fault, it was the spaghetti thing.
And it's the Muschetti threw me. I apologize.
Marvin, please give your name before you start.
I'm members of the board. Marvin Trotter, I'm the Chief Medical Officer at UNC, and I'm here to urge you to make a vote for the Orchard Avenue project. I think that's the quickest, best way to proceed with your funds at this time. I don't see that it isn't a priority at some point in the future. It's what was suggested by your Kemper report. I think it will give us immediate help, counseling and beds. I know there's some issues that I'm sure Ms. Elliott will figure out with the project, but in some form or manner, I think it's the low-hanging fruit. You have much more complex issues in front of you, but I would urge you to at least vote in favor of the project so we can work on what other issues are necessary.
Thank you, Dr. Trout.
Actually, I'm sorry. I didn't hear what you said.
Okay.
What specifically?
The
What
Orchard Avenue project, which is the two-story building with mental health, where they'll do crisis counseling, they'll also have beds for crisis stabilization. It's the RCS project in Ukiah. I'm sorry, I wasn't more
Sorry for my bad
specific.
hearing.
My bad communication.
Thank you, Dr.
That-
Trout.
Thank you very much, Dr. Barish.
This is breaking
That's
first
what I've
time.
been called.
So may we have an approval of the minutes from the December 19th meeting?
May I speak really quickly?
First there has to be.
I just want to do a prelude, no anything else. First of all, I'd like to thank Dora for last year.
Yes.
And everything that she did. It was great. I have talked to Carla and I have read this month's minutes and they are well done. And there will be more narrative in the next month's minutes. And we are now having them transcribed so that anyone can look and see and refer to the minutes in lieu of having to watch a 2.5-hour video, and that's all I wanted to say. And thank you, Carla.
Can I have a motion for approval of minutes from the last meeting?
I move
that they be approved.
Jed,
I will tooth it.
second. All opposed, anybody opposed to that? Passes. Moving on to election of a vice chair.
Wait, we didn't, so As a point of order, generally the clerk will call a vote for after a motion and will poll for ayes or nays. Is that not historically how it's been done? Okay, just want to make sure that, okay. I don't want to interrupt, but historically that's how, so we can record it onto the video and to the audio
Yes.
as well as onto the minutes. So we'll start with Member Diamond,
Yes.
Sheriff Ullman,
Yes.
Member Riley,
Yes.
Member Myrtle,
Yes.
Member Muschetti,
Yes.
Auditor Weir,
Yes.
Member Liberty,
Yes.
CEO Angelo,
Yes.
Member McGorty,
Usually we just take a,
okay.
So you are being recorded,
Yeah,
so.
the purpose of the audio is because, especially when we're doing a transcript, it's important to hear the person's audio response because the transcript won't pick up a raise of the hand or a lowering of the hand, so. Yes, correct. Yeah, so it would be helpful if we could do it that way, thank you. And, Member Miller, Dr. Miller.
Yes.
Thank you.
Moving on to agenda item 3D, election of a vice chair in the Health Treatment and Citizens Oversight Committee. Sponsor,
That's you.
that's me.
Me, well, it's me. So the rules of procedure call that a vice chair be elected at the first meeting of the year. And that item is open for discussion and or a motion.
Yes, Jeff, please.
Yeah, I'd like to nominate Donna Muschetti for vice chair. I think she'd be a good candidate and a good balance for the chair who's now in power.
Very good, and Ross seconded. Is there any discussion?
You have to ask me if I
Oh. We were just assuming. Do you accept, Donna?
Yeah, I guess.
This must be. All right, now do you go around again?
Yeah, I do that. I do that every time. I'm sorry. All right. So the motion is by Member Diamond, seconded by Member Liberty to nominate Member Muschetti to as vice chair of the committee. We'll take the vote. Member Diamond,
Yes.
Sheriff Ullman,
Yes.
Member Riley, yes. Member Myrtle,
Yes.
Member Muschetti,
No.
yes. Chair Barash,
Yes.
Auditor Weir,
Yes.
Member Liberty, CEO Angelo,
Yes.
Member McGorty,
Yes.
and Dr. Miller.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
So, do we ask for public comment after each of these? also?
If anyone wanted to speak, they could step forward.
Is there anybody who would like to make any comment on our proceedings? So, moving on to the auditor's report, discussion possible action regarding expenditure report on Measure B tax funds.
So you should all have summary in your packet for the Mental Health Treatment Act Fund. This is a restricted fund that I'm supposed to keep all the funds separated in. This is my standard format that I bring you every month, and this month there is one change to the revenues, which is in the top portion of the report.
Excuse me, Lloyd, can you tell us where it is in the stack of things we were given?
This far down.
Okay, towards the top. Got it.
It's right underneath the cover sheet that says 3C.
Okay, I'll find it. Sorry, go ahead.
Alrighty. So the only change for this month is the in the revenue section at the top. We have now inserted a line dated December 26, 2018 for our October tax proceeds of $652,942, bringing our total tax proceeds to $4,711,904 to date. Below, our expenditures have not changed, been no new expenditures. And at the bottom, you can see there's a life-to-date interest of $3,400. So the total fund balance in the fund at this point in time is $516,255. That's all I have.
So moving to the, is there any public comment on, please?
Hold the phone. I just had a question. Oops.
Can you state your name for the record?
I'm getting ready to do that, yes. Carol Hester, if I remember correctly. Weren't you supposed to include, maybe this is just history, but weren't a consultant ED, weren't we gonna do a line item?
So what you're looking at here is actual funding
Okay.
and expenses. The budget included an item for those expenditures, and is in the process of being approved by the board.
Okay,
And then once the budget is approved and set, then we can
that comes into this.
get sent and
Thank you.
pay for them out of this one.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
So, item 3D, discussion and possible action regarding update from county council regarding legal issues raised by the community.
Excuse me, Ace, could you talk a little louder? I'm not hearing it, I'm not sure
We're not
everybody in
either.
the back can as well.
All right, I'll talk about it.
Thanks.
So, good afternoon, Catherine Elliott, County Council, and I am happy to report that I brought this item to the Board of Supervisors to determine if they would agree to my spending my time at these meetings, and also to discuss funding, because of course when I'm here, I'm not doing other items. And the board unanimously agreed that I should be at these meetings, and unanimously agreed that that this should be just part of my job coming here, that they would not be asking for Measure B funds. They know this is a citizens committee, and that this was supported in the popular vote, and they want to give their support to this committee as well. So those were some of the things I heard from my board in coming here. There were 4 questions that were sent, and just to explain sort of my own process, and I have several attorneys in my office that specialize in different items that come before this board. I am going to try and give you sort of general guidance as we go through this, as opposed to written legal opinions. I think that will be helpful, and I think ultimately when we go forward and the board does sign on to something and start going forward with it, that's when, if there was an issue or a problem, I would give a full written opinion. If it's needed for this, I would probably do that, but I don't think that we will have enough specifics for me to give you that written opinion. I also think by sitting in these meetings and hearing what's going on and where the questions come from, I can respond quicker and again, try and give you some direction. So I've got 4 questions here. And the first one is a legal opinion regarding the City of Willits claims as to jurisdiction over utilizing the old Howard Hospital as a PHF, et cetera, facility. The great thing about the law is it's complex. So, and I will say, just for information's sake, my understanding is this was a question that was posed by Mr. Liberty, so I specifically met with him and some of my staff in my office to explain some of the complications. So the answer, see if I can do the simple answers, and again, I'm not the planning and building person in my office, but the answer is that basically a county-owned property is, we oversee our own county-owned property. We are subject to our own rules and not the city's rules, so that's a simple answer. The secondary answer, however, is looking at, it's 22 CCR 77039, which is, what will change that answer is the certification from the state. What kind of certification are we seeking? What are we doing? And so the state then can impose local restrictions from the local entity on whatever building we're doing. So again, it depends on if we own it, there are many exceptions to that. So that rule only applies if it's the county. The rule is different if it's a private entity, as I understand it. So in other words, there are other steps we would have to go through to make sure that we comply with perhaps city rules, et cetera, depending on what the state mandates. And it's my understanding, in speaking with CEO Angelo, that I believe she and I believe Tammy Moss Chandler have reached out to the state with regard to our state requirements and what we need to do in terms of licensing. So I know that's been looked at and is in process, but again, I would have to get into the very specifics of what kind of building, how we were doing it in order to understand those. Also, I wanted to bring attention, and Dr. Miller could address this as well as I could, is California Welfare and Institution Code 4080. And so what that says is regarding licensing of psychiatric health facilities. Psychiatric health facilities shall only be licensed by the State Department of Healthcare Services, subsequent to the application by the county. For counties, once they choose to apply, the local mental health director shall first present to the local mental health advisory board for its review an explanation of the need for this facility and a description of the services to be provided. The local mental health director shall then submit to the governing body, the Board of Supervisors, the explanation and description, and the governing body, upon its approval, may submit the application to the State Department of Healthcare Services. So I'm just trying to get you an idea of how this process works to kind of explain what you're going to be going through. So, I will say all of my sort of legal advice here are the sort of general principles. There are always exceptions to the rules. So number 2, Board of Supervisors' legal ability to spend Measure B funds on building and or improving facilities not owned by the county. So the county can give money to enhance a building owned by somebody else. It would not be considered a gift of public funds if it was done for the public good. However, this committee is a citizens committee that is put here to oversee this funding. And I can tell you, trying to put enough restrictions, oversight, et cetera, to somebody else's buildings with the county money would be very difficult indeed. And we would be at risk of investing the county's monies as given to us by the citizens into a building that we would lose control of and have nothing in the future to show for that. So as far as the legal side of that, one answer is yes, we could do that. 2, would that be probably a very bad idea? I would say so, because we would not be able to legally have enough oversight in the future. And those funds, as my understanding in reading this, one of the big issues is getting a facility built or a facility that we have control over, and we could lose that control.
I think Jen, you already had a question.
You said that if a building is county property, then the county would be in charge, and I wasn't quite sure if the old Howard Hospital sits on county property.
No, not currently, but if we were to purchase it, then it would become county property.
And in the case of a partnership, as with Adventist Health, I can see certain advantages to doing something like that, but I wonder if you'd comment on that, because you said in general, for the county not to own a building that they're investing money in is a bad idea. I wonder if there's any way around that to have such a partnership.
Again, so it's looking in the future in terms of control, and part of why I'm here is because I haven't heard all the prior discussions, so I don't know all of the things that you're considering. So I'm just trying to give you some guidance. and direction. The Measure B itself, isn't specific. So and again, you are the Citizens Oversight Committee to try and make sure that we spend this money wisely. There are other ways, for example, you're talking about a partnership with the hospital. One of the things might be that the hospital gives us part of their property and we build a building next to the hospital. I mean, that would be an answer to that, where we would have, again, more oversight in terms of that building and yet be able to work collaboratively.
Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to question to you and maybe others on the committee that would know since Ken hasn't been here. Would this apply to the Orchard facility that we've talked about and that Dr. Trotter had just spoken to earlier? Because my understanding that facility is not owned by the county presently. Can we get some clarification of how that might affect that potential use of the facility?
I think with the county council's guidance, RQMS has offered to donate the facility to the county, to change title. So, and I suppose part of the reason to have county council here is to help us make these kind of decisions.
Okay. Is that the sense of those that have been studying this a little more, you're nodding your head? Ross is saying yes?
I'd like to hear from county council. Is that true?
Well, again, I'm hearing discussions that I haven't been involved in, so I don't know the answer about this donation back. Again, if they were donating it back to us and it became county property, we're in a very different situation.
Can I give an example, or is that outside the scope of this item? Yeah. Okay, so I guess that's your
I
question.
mean, you're trying to understand the answers I'm giving you,
Right.
so yes,
Right,
you could
so-
give me an example, I think.
So Ukiah Valley Medical Center has just built a new addition to the hospital, and in doing so, they have an intensive care unit that's vacant right now. And so one of the proposals was to create a psychiatric hospital, a small psychiatric addition to the acute hospital, which would be owned by Adventist Health. It's part of their hospital. The advantage to us is that they would run the facility. But just as a partnership, we would pay the costs of renovation.
Right, so let's just go down that road, so the county then pays all the money for the renovation. How long a contract can we enter to assure that we get that continued use for that purpose?
Well, that's exactly what I wondered, if we could contractually.
Not long. Not long. I mean, I think that's where you get into trouble. I mean, there's always ways, contracts can always be broken. I mean,
I see. So you can't, even if you make a long contract, I mean, right now, for example, Howard Hospital has a 50-year contract with the Howard Foundation to run the hospital.
so, and I'd be glad to come back on that question because again, we have other private entities have different contracting rights in the county. So I would want to explore what kind of thing we could do in terms of long run. What I am saying is it's more difficult if it's not a county-owned facility. So, not impossible. Number 3, conditions in which Measure B funds can be used for construction of facilities without paying prevailing wage rates. Again, the general answer is that there are none. I mean, that's the general answer. We have to, if it's county and we're going forward, the county would have to be paying prevailing wages.
Well, again, now this gets back to the original one. So in the building of the Orchard facility, I think part of the problem in approaching this is that there's not a lot of construction teams in the county just because of all the fires that happened recently. And one of the issues was that RQMC could actually use their in-house construction team. And being as that they're a private entity, they wouldn't have to pay prevailing wage, so we'd save a lot of money. And again, could we manage this contractually in such a way that they promise to use that for some acceptable length of time as a minimum?
So this is the situation you're putting me in. You're saying, as the lawyer for the county, I'm going to advise you how to go around the prevailing wage. mandate.
I see. Okay, so that wouldn't look good.
No.
It wouldn't be right. And again, one of the things I say in terms of my ethics lectures, et cetera, is we are one of the bigger employers in this county. People have a right to bid for our business. They have a right to be paid prevailing wages. That's
Okay.
not only
This
the
is-
legal thing to do, it's the right thing to do.
This is good for those of us who are not sophisticated in these issues to learn.
So again, there are, all of the things that I'm saying, there may be exceptions in terms of specific, for example, it could be, we could go out for a grant. The grant could have specific instructions, there are certain other things, but the general rule is no. And in respect to design build contracts, can the design contractor also be the build contractor? And it goes on to say, do county procurement procedures preclude this? Similar to federal procedures, yes, county procurement procedures in this regard do mirror the federal. So design build contractors, the design contractor cannot be the build contractor. And some of that is laid out in the conflicts of interest code, I believe it's 1090. Which is, Government Code 1090, which says basically that creates a conflict because you have somebody bidding on this and they have, of course, obviously sort of the inside hand on that having bigger designers. So again, that's the general rule. So, and hopefully that.
Myrtle.
I look at state contracts registered as bid daily, and it's very common for design, build, public works contracts. I could bring examples to the next meeting where
So-
they have design, build contracts, so I don't believe that is accurate.
So are you looking at city or county?
I'm looking at public works contracts.
For the city?
It could be city, county, state.
I mean, because the cities have different rules. So,
So, I don't understand where you have that, what qualifications there are. And I've worked for contractors that have done school projects that were design build, which means that they sent out a design build contract proposal and they had design build contractors bid on that. So it wasn't conflict because everyone was bidding on the same scope of work.
So
That's
you're,
not a conflict of interest, it's a scope of work proposal.
okay, so, and maybe I was walked through what this question meant, and so my understanding was, once somebody's designed it, can they then build it? So, and so that was
As alternate scopes of work, instead of sending it out as a
Right.
design build
right.
project.
So that was, and I'm glad you asked that, because that was how this question was described to me, if I'm right, but, so.
Yeah, so
Please, Mr. Liberty.
I'm the one bringing the confusion to the table, I'm afraid. I thought when we looked at the proposal regarding Howard Hospital, that they said they can't do design build because
They
it's
won't.
public works.
They won't do design build, not that they can't, they won't.
Okay, that's.
Tuesday.
I read it
Yeah,
differently.
okay, thank you.
So I'm glad you asked. So again, I was trying to answer the question. What I thought I heard when we were discussing it is
Oh,
that,
no, you got what I
right,
said.
okay.
Maybe I'm wrong.
And so with that clarification, so we understand what question I was trying to answer. So I was trying to answer if can the one come in on the other, and the answer
If
is
they were,
no.
if they were
But can you put out a
independent, if
whole
they were independent
package?
events, correct? If they designed it as an independent contract and they built it as an independent contract,
Right,
that would be a conflict of
that's
interest.
a
But if
conflict
it
of
was,
interest.
if the work was placed together, it could be. If it was advertised property,
one
as
process.
one
Right. And-
project.
And I would wanna just review that again, because this isn't, I would wanna review that with my planning and building
Sure.
person. But that wasn't the question I was trying to answer,
Okay.
so, just to clarify.
Go Ross.
Sorry.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Elliott. Is there any public comment on this item?
I'd like to ask a
Yes,
question.
yes, sure.
So, to clarify the use of public funds, if we were to gift or donate money to, say, a business to improve their building, they don't own the building, but we're funding a portion of money to that building, would that still require prevailing wages if it was not earmarked?
So I need you to clarify your
Okay,
question.
let's
So you're
speak
saying,
specifically.
when you're
Let's
saying
speak-
they, so that.
Let's speak specifically.
Okay,
We were giving Advantage Health to help modernize their facility
okay,
but we had not earmarked the money for that. We had given them a gift to help provide funding to modernize the building. Is that still required to pay prevailing wages? Does A own the building and we're giving a gift to, supplement the construction? Because it's
So
not a
if they're-
county-owned facility,
right,
it's
it's
just
not
it's a donation.
and of course, I don't know any of the hospital rules themselves, so I can't answer for their side. When we're giving, there's certain things, when we're giving a gift of funds, sometimes there are requirements, sometimes they aren't, but I don't believe so in that situation, but I would wanna also, I don't like to give legal opinions sort of off the cuff, but I wouldn't imagine so.
Okay.
And again, so just to be very clear, the Board of Supervisors can give money that are things for the public good. That's one issue. The second issue is, what can you do with Measure B funds when they were earmarked for a very specific purpose? So I think you're under more restrictions in that regard.
Thank you very much. Any public comment? Oh, sorry, I'm sorry.
public comment first.
Yes.
Your
Good
name for the
afternoon,
record? Just kidding.
John McCown, Board of Supervisors. The board did authorize county council to be present to give general guidance to the committee and to not charge any of her time against Measure B. The part of the board discussion was also, we recognize many of the legal questions that you're faced with are complicated, complex, require in-depth research. So the board, part of the board discussion was also that this committee should be open to requesting of the county that we authorize hiring of outside counsel to assist county council with some of the more complex, time-consuming issues that you may be faced with.
And that would be subject to your request, I would assume.
And I appreciate him bringing that up, that is the piece. So the question is, if I start doing legal opinions or we have more in-depth, how much time? So one of the things that my board has requested of me is that I report back to them what hours I'm spending on this, so we can determine if we need also outside counsel to assist. I think I got that right?
Well, I think it's really, if the committee feels it needs that,
Right.
make a request. That's the channel.
Right, and then I would bring that request back to the board.
Yes, Ms. Hester.
Go ahead, sir. So, excuse my dumbness, but so does this mean then, county council, that we have no options at this day? That we can go forward, y'all can go forward and make a decision? We can't do the Orchard because of this, we can't do the hospital because of this, we can't do the Howard Hospital because of this. So, to me, it seems like y'all are now talking about another month. or 2 or 3 or 4. There's no answer.
Well, so, and I want to say again, just to have procedure, normally the public doesn't ask questions. You get to ask questions of staff. Question goes back through the chair. If the chair wants to
No, I
ask me to
I
address
was about
something.
to.
Okay. So the answer is I don't think that's what was said here today. What was said is that there are these things we can do. Again, we have to look at the specifics as we go forward.
Where there is a question.
Right.
Yes, Ms. NJ.
Thank you, Chair Barish. So, a couple comments. One is, I really appreciate having County Counsel Elliott here and in her representation of the board action as far as allowing us to have her here as our counsel. And also, what Supervisor McCowan was referring to, I think is actually good news for the Measure B committee, if you caught the full flavor of what he was saying. I mean, Chief Counsel Elliott is here because this committee really needs assistance with running a meeting that is Brown Act compliant. And so Chief Counsel Elliott is here to really assist us with all things Brown Act. And any committee that's a Brown Act committee needs assistance with Brown Act compliance. So, we're fortunate to have her here. I do agree with Supervisor McCowan, though, that some of the questions are extremely technical. And, to have a generalist and then ask so many technical questions is not always easy for that generalist to respond to. Clearly, nobody in here, and we certainly have contractors here that are among us, and we have welders as well. And still, they can't answer these technical questions. So I think that the offer that Supervisor McCowan just brought to the table on behalf of the board and Chief Counsel Elliott is that as we get into more technical issues, that Chief Elliott could bring in outside counsel for Measure B. And I don't want us to miss that, because I am of the opinion that we will need technical legal assistance, much more so than we have today. I also think that we're in the weeds here. And, these questions have been on the table for the last year. I understand that, but we're in the weeds. And I think that Carol Hester's question about, does this mean we can't do anything? No, it doesn't mean we can't do anything. What it means is that we need to begin to really look at what those options are that we want to do. And when we find those options that we absolutely think are the right path forward, then we figure out how we do that. We're pretty much all over the board because there are so many opportunities. But at some point, I don't think we need to stick with, we can't do this because of this reason, or we can't do this, or, really at some point we need to really decide as a committee what is the best course of action, whether it's a 24-hour psychiatric facility or whether it's crisis residential. And I think we have a key opportunity now. We have an attorney if we need one. We could get technical legal assistance if we need one. And so at what point can we actually start looking at what those recommendations are that we want to move forward to the Board of Supervisors? Thank you, Chair.
And I would like to echo what Ms. Angelo said about appreciating your support and your being here, and the Board of Supervisors for allowing it without charge to us. Moving on to item 3E, discussion of possible action including review of temporal report as recommended by the Behavioral Health Advisory Board and adoption of recommendations contained therein.
I did receive an additional study guide this morning from Member Mabody that I'd like to pass out. It is a compilation of the previous two, so instead of having two, now you just have one complete guide. So, pass those out. Apologize for the interruption.
Thank you,
Yeah, I will pass. Thank you.
So,
Not the same.
Chairman.
No, it's different.
Would you like me to leave this discussion? Thank
And I'll
you.
put the rest on the table back here.
Okay, so, we spent a lot of money. Our committee actually asked that, Mr. Kemper do an analysis of our county and make recommendations, and we got that, but we haven't really looked at it. So the Behavioral Health Advisory Board has looked at it in depth, and so, I thought it'd be good for our board too, because what we found was that some of the recommendations that were made were pretty general and vague. So, I prepared the study guide to help us figure out how to approach it, because just randomly saying, oh, what do you think of the Kemper report was not productive. So there's like 4 parts to this. According to the recommendations that he made, there's the program services, there's action and policy, there's strategic financing plan, and then recommended action for the Board of Supervisors. The Behavioral Health Board only reviewed the program services and the action and policy parts. So I thought it would be good for this board as well to go through it by line item. And the reason that I combined these was, at first I thought, oh, well, we should think for ourselves. We shouldn't bother knowing what they did. But in case you want to see, they're side by side. Everything in yellow is what the Behavioral Health Advisory Board is recommending to the Board of Supervisors. And so then the blank one is for us, for our consultation. So the first item under program services was that there should be a psychiatric health facility or other inpatient psychiatric care created. And the details were that a PUF unit is an average of 3 to 5 days. It's a maximum of 30 days. It's what's costing so much money out of county. So the Behavioral Health Board said, wow, we talked about putting out an RFP for this, but the problem was that we didn't have enough information. We didn't know what the staffing was. We didn't know what the licensing requirements were, et cetera. So what we did was we suggested that we put out an RFI, which my techie person informed me is a request for information, so that we would have all of this background information and could make an informed decision. So, what do you guys think?
RFI to who?
An RFI to somebody who can gather this information, maybe a consultant, I don't know. I mean, who would you put an RFP out to?
RFP you would put out to a contractor or an institution that actually does this. That would be a request for proposal.
After you already know what you
Right.
want, right,
Right,
yeah.
that's, a request for information is asking for information from some specific body about what is needed. I don't know if that's.
Just resonating with what you're saying, I think, there are a lot of questions, like, for example, if we were to settle on the old Howard Hospital to build a facility, there are a lot of questions. There have been objections brought up as to why that would not be a good facility to use. For example, somebody from out of county, when released, would walk out on the streets of Willits and could provide a liability for us in having to deal with them, and to talk to another facility and find out the extent to which that actually happens. Just that kind of information. Or one of the proposals, because the old Howard Hospital is too big for just a PUF unit, there was a proposal for another locked unit for taking care of some of the conserved individuals from out of county. It would be very interesting to have a comparison of how much is being paid out of county versus how much we would save by having our own facility. But I think maybe these are the kinds of information you're talking about.
Well, yeah, just general stuff on staffing and licensing and different ideas. It's hard to put out a request for proposal unless you know what you want to do.
Right.
So that's a good question though,
Well-
is who would get that information?
Who would spend the time to answer this?
None of us, that's the point.
None of the people either, there's no money there. I mean, if you get a request for proposal from somebody that is interested, my idea, and I've been thinking about this quite extensively, is advertise a request for proposal to see if anybody's interested to even run a pump facility. If we can't get a contractor to run it, then what are we wasting our time for? Yeah, why would we build it if we can't get a contractor to run it?
Yes, but Chair Roche, two things. One is, you're right, Member Myrtle, but when we do and I'm looking at this whenever you talk about request for information, request for proposal, I see it as a counting process, which is extensive and very detailed, but this would go out to the public, and usually, depending on what the project is, we do have a list of vendors or contractors that we refer to, but we could put out an RFP or an RFI, we could keep it out for 60 days until we get good responses. So I want to say that because just as the Behavioral Health Board has put this out, I'm sure that they're thinking also of county processes, and that's something that we could do. But what I wanted to do was really step back. I appreciate this item coming forward from Member McGorty and Member Diamond, who hasn't said a word yet on this item, but
I have my hand up, so.
Okay.
So you're done.
But what I'm wondering is that we jumped right into the recommendations. So the item is to review the recommendations, and just is that what we're going to do as a committee? So that we could then be clear, if we are reviewing these recommendations, that we actually have something that we make a decision. We're going to review and let's make a decision on each recommendation, because my assumption is once we did that this is what we would move forward to the Board of Supervisors. So it's a question. Thank you.
Mr. Benton?
Yeah, I was wanting a clarification as well about what this item is that we're talking about and what the action is, what we're going to do. Because I had put in a request and you had put in a request that sounded like they were somewhat similar. My recommendation had to do with a balance between what Sheriff Ahmed had said when this group first started. He said we've got to become a committee that doesn't just sit and talk about stuff and talk, but we act, number one. On the other side, we have to act in ways that when we recommend programs to the Board of Supervisors, that they be well thought out and that they be recommended, that we're going to be recommending spending of money. So we have to balance action and responsible decision making. And what Kit's pointing out, which is a third, is it has to be legal. We have to recommend within guidelines that, that meet the law. So I had some specific, I'll just say what mine is, and I'm not sure exactly what you were wanting us to do today, but mine, I'll just say what it is and we can decide how to combine these. My recommendation was that we need guidance, and I think we're in agreement with this, about how do we proceed every meeting. It seems to me that part of the problem is we don't have a consistent method of moving ahead on decision making. So my recommendation, one, is that we accept the Kemper report as a guidance for our moving ahead. And then secondly, that we have a small committee made up or appointed by our new, that each time would bring a recommendation for what priority programs from the Kemper report we want to work on, so that we would all know in advance, okay, this is the item that we're going to be looking at, and we would stay with it to get whatever information we need, so that we know if we're going to be talking about a PUF, we know this is what we're going to talk about, and that we would know that's the priority item we're going to talk about. We'd get whatever information we need, and we would stick with it until we actually recommend to the Board of Supervisors a specific recommendation for funding. Because otherwise, my experience is we bounce all around, and each month we have a set of different ideas from different people, and we spin our wheels a lot. So that was what I was hoping. So So I was gonna put that in the form of a motion when we're ready for a decision about that, but I wasn't sure what you were asking, Jan, for us to do today with this.
Well, my point was that we got a big packet from the Kemper consulting firm. There were a number of recommendations. We haven't really read them as a committee to actually see what they are, let alone discuss them. And I would hesitate on assigning a committee to talk about like a PUF unit, because it's something I think that the whole committee should be concerned with. I mean, perhaps the committee could get the information that's needed to talk about. But what I've observed here is that what we're hearing is people who come to us who want money to do something. And we're not looking at what was recommended that we consider. And that's, I think, what we should take time on. I mean, this is easy to get through, it takes time. But I don't think it's something that we should avoid, because we, in the past, have skipped all over the place because we haven't followed a plan.
I think we're saying a similar thing, is that we need a framework, and I think you and I are in agreement. I think the committee is that the Kemper report is a good framework. The Kemper report, we spent a lot of time on it. I've read it 4 times. I think everybody has read it. Well, I'm just telling you, I've read it 4 times. I can tell you that for sure. I feel like I understand it. I've read the recommendations, the priorities. And I think we would do well as a committee to accept the report as our guide. And then from that, I think we need to bring forth specific priorities, not that we would have a specific program, but if we, for instance, if the first priority was a PUF unit, that we would get whatever we need to make a decision on the PUF unit. Or if the next recommendation was the crisis residential treatment, we would know that's the next thing we're going to discuss. We would keep on that until we had a specific recommendation to the board. So I think that's similar to what you're saying.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah.
How do we go forward?
So yes, Ms. Angela.
Chair Barish, I'm going to jump in because I'm sitting here thinking both of you are saying the same thing. You're just going about it in a different way. You're basically saying that your recommendation out of this item, and your name is on it, is a recommendation that the Measure B committee adopt the Kemper report as a guideline or a guide moving forward to what we want to do. And Jan's component of that is going through those recommendations. So if the Measure B committee decided to adopt the Kemper report as a guide for moving forward, I would say I'm looking at our clerk and looking at our attorney, but the information is in here with both names on this item. That could be part of the recommended action, that the report is adopted as a guide, and as part of that adoption of the Kemper report, that we then would go through each recommendation with the intent of making a decision, yes or no, on that recommendation, and then moving that recommendation forward. And I don't know about the committee. I think you two both have different ideas on having a committee, but it would seem that that might be the first step.
That's right.
Thank you. I agree for the need for a guide, a strategic plan, whatever you call it. I think it's important for transparency for this committee, so that there's a document that the public can refer to and know this is how they've prioritized the Measure B money. These are the projects that will come forward. My question is really a clarification of the Behavioral Health Advisory Board's analysis. In general, is the Behavioral Health Board's analysis consistent in terms of the prioritization of projects? Is it consistent with the Kemper report, or does it diverge?
We did not set priorities. We went through in the order that he had made his recommendations.
Okay.
And the only place where it got prioritized in his recommendations, my understanding is in the action plan, the recommended action for the Board of Supervisors, which had
And also
5
I believe the
points.
financial
We didn't discuss that.
plan. Okay.
We didn't discuss either of those, yeah.
Thank you.
Can I have a motion regarding adopting?
So
Close.
Good save.
Just to reiterate that the recommended act, that the agenda item says discussion and possible action, including review of the Kemper report and adoption of recommendations contained therein. So the motion, there's not a motion yet. The first action will be to review the report and then adopt any key recommendations contained therein. So there's not a motion to be made at this point?
Well, so you're saying that this is to review the Kemper report
Correct,
today?
correct.
Okay. I misunderstood.
So I can see how we can shorten that though. I mean, we can summarize, oh, look, there's four different sections of the Kemper report. Why don't we accept that as a guideline for further study and action?
I second.
So,
Did Member McGordy want to walk us through the report and recommendations?
Okay, so there's four sections. There's his recommendation for program and services, pages 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, no. Page 6 is his recommendations for action and policy, which were found on page 43 of his report. And then there was his proposed strategic financing plan, which was found on page 44. And in this, it's page 7 and 8. And page 9 is his recommended action for the Board of Supervisors, which was found on page 46 of his report. So is that 4 sections? I didn't count. 1, 2, yeah, that's 3, 4. The 4 sections. So we reviewed the outline of his recommendation.
so,
Med school was tough, huh?
is there any discussion regarding the foregoing review? Is there any public comment regarding this item? Moving on to.
Wait.
Sorry. Oh, I'm sorry.
John McCowan, Board of Supervisors, and I do think following the Kemper report, using it as an outline for decision-making is an excellent suggestion. And I appreciate the work that Jan McGordy and the Behavioral Health Advisory Board have done. However, in reviewing that, I think it should be in companion to the original Kemper report, which page 43 is key policy decisions and recommended actions. 44, proposed Measure B strategic financing plan. And then 45, he lays it out numerically what his recommendations are. And we do need the corrected version, which includes the training facility, which he originally left out of his report, but I believe that he then reworked it to include that and revise some of the numbers. But I think going through that point by point, that's an outline that the committee could easily follow. And first of all, take the items as he's recommending. Again, page 44, the proposed Measure B strategic financing plan, he makes specific recommendations. You could say, first, do you approve of it in concept or not? And then, presuming you do, you can then drill down deeper into what does it cost, where should it be, et cetera. With regard to the expanded services, and I think that's pretty easy on the capital projects, with regard to the expanded services, the BHAB has made many specific recommendations, so I think folding those two together, you could actually move through this and come to some decisions. Thank you.
All
I want to just make, if I can, just one comment about how I think we could proceed is if we accepted the Kemper report as a guideline, the only addition I'm suggesting is that somebody or small group would each time, based on what we've accepted in the Kemper report, would bring forth a specific priority that this group then could, look at and then make a decision on, however long that would take. So for instance, if we said that the item that we need to make the decision on is the PUF unit, that's the first most important thing that we need to address, or crisis residential, whatever the priority is, that would be brought before the committee so we would know. Next month, that's what we're going to talk about, that's what we're going to discuss, that's what we will come to a decision and recommend to the board for funding so that we could keep things moving along. And we could also, everybody would know in advance which priority we're going to address, and that we would stay with it till we actually have a decision that we could recommend to the board so we don't go around and around. That's the only piece that I'm adding, I think, to what you're saying, is that somebody, I think, needs to do that to present to us. And so it isn't all of us trying to do it together. And I think that's part of why, if we're all making recommendations on what we're going to discuss, we spend a lot of time, and I think we get off track.
So Jen, I hear you recommending a format as to how we proceed in considering the Kemper report. Is that right?
Well, I made, and I'm not sure how we do it.
There's a motion on the floor, right?
Well, I'm not sure there is, that's what I was.
Right, yeah.
No, I don't think
We
there's a
did it?
motion. No, I don't have a motion.
It was a little.
There was a second.
No,
There was a second, there was no motion.
No,
Yeah,
there's no motion. No motion, no motion.
Well,
Thank you anywhere.
So somebody make a motion.
Well, I would like to make a motion, if, again, I'm not sure, you'll have to tell me if it fits within the item as it's described. But my motion was to accept the Kemper report as a guideline for this committee to make recommendations for the Board of Supervisors on program priority and funding. That's my first motion.
Can you repeat the last? I have, accept Kemper report as a guideline for this committee to make recommendations for the Board of Supervisors on, and then I'm sorry, I lost you.
Program priority and funding.
Thank you. Okay, so now you ask for a second.
So second, yes. Is there a second?
I will second it. I want to make sure that accepting the Kemper report is exactly as Jed said, is going to be a guideline. The Kemper report certainly doesn't agree with everything that I believe personally of the priorities of where the county needs to go. But as far as looking to it for guidelines and not by the strict following of the Kemper report, then that's what my second would be.
Well, the second would have to mirror the motion.
He used the word guideline, and I merely seconded by stating the word guideline is a very important word in his motion.
Okay, so you second his motion.
I did.
Thank you.
So put guidelines in caps.
Is there any further discussion?
We have a pen.
Oh, what? I'm sorry?
The
Oh, Ross
pen,
wants to
the
talk.
pen that means that someone wants to speak.
Oh, I see, okay.
Yes.
Okay, I didn't get that.
So I agree with Tom and I agree with Jen, but in terms of it being a guideline, I believe no battle plan survives the first attack. And we're going to find out as we go forward that, trying to follow that, the Kemper reports strictly is going to be not the best path. I mean, and I don't even know where it's going to deviate, but I agree. It'd be a good guideline, but it's a guideline. And we already found some issues with a lot of the funding numbers for the brick and mortar that were just, they were wishful thinking at best. So we're going to find a lot of problems with it, but having it as a guideline, because we need some kind of guideline, right? I mean,
I agree. I believe it a guideline and not a roadmap.
There you go. I like that. That's good. Yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
I didn't mean-
Oh, okay.
I would like to support that, we go ahead and use the Kemper report as a guideline only. I too am concerned about some of the prioritization in there and some of the financial aspects of it that I think we need to really discuss and elaborate on. But we do need organization and we need a direction here, and if we can follow these recommendations, I think that will speed this up a little bit for this committee.
Any other further comment?
You've changed.
Oh, yes, Ms. Angela.
Can you please repeat the motion?
Thank you.
Thank you.
The motion by Member Diamond was accept Kemper report as a guideline for this committee to make recommendations for the Board of Supervisors on program priorities and funding.
Does that motion include that we actually review the recommendations?
But we'd have to.
Because I'm assuming that we want to review the recommend. If we're gonna use this as a guide, I'm thinking we're gonna review the recommendations to move those recommendations forward or not. Is that part of the motion or not?
Would you like to amend your motion to include that or clarify?
Well, my clarification is we've been reviewing, we've been reviewing them and it's reviewed. Part of my reasoning for having a small subcommittee or group to then bring forth specific priority areas for full discussion by the committee is so that we could then drill down into that, take the specific priorities that we feel are most important, and then bring them to the full committee for discussion and ultimately recommendation to the board. So I think we've done that, is what I'm saying. I don't think we need to take another month to do more review.
Dan?
I beg to differ. I don't think that we have reviewed them in depth. We've said, oh, yeah, here's a Kemper report and everybody read it, but that's not really reviewing his recommendation. I think it's important that we read it together and see what they are. I know you've read it 4 times. I mean, I read it 4 times and it was really difficult. I had to take a break during each of the 4 times because it's so complex.
I agree.
So reviewing it is different from studying it. We're actually looking at his recommendations. And I think, yes, we could break it down, because there were 4 sections of recommendations, but I think it's important that we look at what his recommendations are. Using it as a guideline, not a roadmap, because the bird's path is more direct.
I'll cut to the chase here. Jan McGordy told the Board of Supervisors that she doesn't believe that every panel member has read the Kemper report. And so I hate to be very blunt with everybody, but if you haven't read the Kemper report, maybe you could raise your hand, because in my heart, I believe everybody's read it.
No, I said that we had studied it in depth.
Right, that's not the words I heard, but I'm asking each member to read, if you haven't read it, to read it.
Even I read it. But actually, I think what she's saying is we didn't, collectively together.
I understand. We meet 2 hours a month. And if we review this, then we all need to block off 40 hours for the month of February and sit down and go page by page. And I know everybody here, and everybody here actually has busy parts of their life where they can't do that. So the responsibility of us being on this committee, it includes the responsibility of reviewing what we paid a lot of money for and not making accusations that we haven't read it, because I believe everybody's read it. So there doesn't need to be an addition that we're going to review it because we've read it. And if you haven't read it, please read it. We have a motion and a second.
Any public comment on this item?
Yeah, John Haschak, Board of Supervisors. I attended the Behavioral Health Advisory Board meeting the other day, and I've looked at these recommendations, or it's kind of like delineating what the Kemper recommendations are. And it seems like everyone on this committee has an understanding of what's going on. And probably everyone has an opinion about what is the highest priority. And just going back to my days as a teacher, is that if we went around this room and said, what's your number one priority? We could probably get some kind of agreement to move forward and to start laying out a plan. If you go, okay, we can see that, PUF unit is everyone's number one, or a CRT, or whatever it is, then we could move forward like that. Just an idea.
So we have a motion and a second on the table.
So,
Are we ready for a vote?
so you go around again? Is that-
That's what I do.
Okay.
All right, so I'm going to repeat the motion so that everybody's clear what the motion is. The motion is by Member Diamond, seconded by Sheriff Hallman, to accept Kemper report as a guideline for this committee to make recommendations for the Board of Supervisors on program priorities and funding. And I will assume that the maker of the motion votes yes.
Yes.
Sheriff Hallman,
Yes, second.
Member Riley,
Yes.
Mr. Myrtle,
Yes.
Ms. Muschetti,
Yes.
Chair Barash.
Yes.
Excuse me. Member Weir?
Yes.
Something in my nose there. Member Liberty?
Yes.
CO Angelo?
I'm going to vote, but before you, I just want to make one comment, which is that whichever way this motion goes, I hope that it affords us the opportunity to move forward with some action. And I think that might have been the point that Member McGordy had and the Behavioral Health Board of going through the recommendations one by one so that we actually saw what was in front of us and were able to take action on those recommendations. And with that said, I'm going to vote yes.
Member McGordy? Dr. Null? Yes. Motion carries unanimously.
Moving on to item. Oh, yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
A brief after-the-fact comment, John McCowan. I do believe my colleague made an excellent suggestion, and if you would simply, as an exercise, go around and name, this is what I believe the number one priority is. After you've gone around, I think you will have identified probably the two or three top priorities that would help focus your discussion and possibly lead to action.
Sure. Start on that side of the room.
Yes, well.
Does
that need to be in the agenda?
No, it does not.
So.
That would work.
Yeah, there's a lot. Anyway, why don't we do that then, Jen?
What's the question?
So, Mr. McCowan would like to know what you identify as the top priority, priority in the report that you would like to see.
Sure, I mean, I can say mine,
I'm sorry, no, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd say mine quickly. There are two. I think the PUF unit is my top priority, or a residential, but I think that will take a long time maybe to get a decision. So I think the most immediate is the crisis residential. So I would put those together and work on them together.
Thank you for the question. I, as a person who collected the vast majority of signatures for Measure AG and requested the Board of Supervisors to put Measure B on the ballot, I have been in every part of this county, talking to citizens and talking to professionals. And without a doubt, my number one priority is a psychiatric health facility for the purpose of allowing hospitals to hopefully reduce their overcrowding and to allow our law enforcement officers to get back out on the street as quick as possible to do other jobs. Thank you for the question.
That's right.
I'm a little uncomfortable with this exercise because although I have read the report numerous times, the acronyms I still have to refer to the glossary that I've made, and so I'm just going to speak in very general terms, but I agree in concept with the Kemper report. The problem is that we've talked about some of these things as a combined effort, as a CRT and a CSU as a combined effort. So to say that I'm prioritizing one and not the other potentially discredits the fact that they could be co-located. So the top three priorities, I agree, are a crisis residential treatment center, a PUF unit, and a crisis stabilization unit in general.
I don't quite understand what you mean by, what was the word you used, if they're co-located?
Co-located.
Yeah, so what was your objection? That you couldn't, if they're gonna be in the same facility?
Right.
It just seems like that would lend more weight to, if their top two recommendations.
Those are my top three recommendations, and one or more of them may be co-located.
Okay, very good. Mr. Merlin.
My top recommendation is to add some cohesion in the mental health situation. The more I study it, the more I realize why there's so many problems, because everything is siloed and there's really no synergy between any of them. So I think there needs to be services that bridge those silos. I think those are very important keys. I think from my communications with others in the other stakeholders in this situation, that we need crisis stabilization, we need crisis residential, we need a PUF unit. I think we need all of those. And I think those are all equal, and that's why I think working together on those to bring the money aspect to the table is important. So putting things in priority without studying them all is going to leave one out. So without putting a financial aspect to each of these important things that Measure D was put on the ballot for, we might not be doing our due diligence. So the priority that I'm saying is CRT, CSU, PUF unit, and services.
Altogether.
Yes.
And that's my exact, sorry, I'm jumping ahead. Mine is prevention, PUF, aftercare, and they all need to go together. All of them.
Okay, rather than questioning, I will respond and also add mine. I like your comment. I completely agree. I mean, I think the silos are a big problem, and I think that we have to have a general overview as to how this is going to happen and connect the dots without acting on priorities, as you say, without seeing the extent to which it's all connected. That being said, as we talk, and as we have talked over a long period of time, the problem continues. And from the beginning, I've been somewhat impatient about doing something about the problem being overload of the hospitals, of the Sheriff's Department, but most of all, of the suffering individuals that really don't have much recourse. I think that there's some infrastructure that's there already that helps. I would at least like to see some organized effort toward people who are in crisis. Certainly the infrastructure is a much larger affair, but also has to be considered at the same time. And as Dr. Trotter said at the beginning, I would like to see us consider the low-hanging fruit. And that being so because of the fact that the staffing is less complex, the price is cheaper, the completion is, the location is decided, the completion date would be the most straightforward and the earliest. And so, given that, I would like to see the project proceed on Orchard Avenue as soon as possible, which is going to be discussed a little further on the next item. Then as that's happening and we have a place to, and again, I think that the crisis stabilization unit will do to some extent what the PUF unit can do, and that is that the sheriff's department can take an individual to the crisis stabilization and not have to stay there with the individual. That we have a locked unit at least for temporary use. And instead of going to the emergency department for extended periods of time, they can go to the crisis stabilization and hopefully step down quickly to the crisis residential. So that is what I identify, that specific building is what I identify as my top priority. Yes?
Can I just clarify what I said?
Yes.
For those of us who have gone through it, there really isn't a priority. Prevention is huge. The first step is huge. If that fails, the PUF unit, it's huge to have it here. And when you've been in a PUF unit, you need aftercare. For those of us who have been through it, there is no priority. They all have to be there. And that's all I want to say.
Mr. Weir?
Yeah, I believe the important priority is a PUF unit, and after that, the crisis residential and the crisis stabilization facilities. And then I would add a training facility. I think in Measure B is very clear that these facilities are 75% of the funding. I believe if you're going to put that much responsibility on the funding, that's where our focus needs to be. I know services are important. 25% of the money is for services. Remember that after 5 years, this measure drops down to 1/8 of a cent, which leaves us with a limited amount of money for services. So I'm afraid if we focus everything up front on services, we'll get down the line and find out maybe in the 6th year, 7th year, we cannot afford to go forward with them. And we'll have to turn to the county for that funding. So I want to stay focused on the facilities and the construction and or development of them. With the 75% of the funding, I think that should be my priority.
Mr. Liberty?
So actually, I agree with a little bit of everything everybody said. I think that prevention is big. I think that we addressed that at least partially with the MOPS program. I think that's worth keeping an eye on. So we actually did do something that maybe we grow that, because that seems like that's a really early warning kind of sign. Then, I think we have a pretty clear path. I think also the Kemper report, one of the top things they listed was the crisis residential and the thing that Camille wants to do. I think that's there's a pretty clear path to that. So I'd kind of be interested in chasing that down. Although I got to tell you, today I thought I had a good understanding of you can't design build, and Mark indicates that I'm not right on that, and I think we need some clarity on that, because one of the motions is to go off for biddable designs. Well, that's going to preclude a design build situation, I would think, right, if we do that. And just to give people a sense of this, if we're going to go out and do a design, look for a biddable design. You're talking just for the design, you're talking close to $1 million. It's very expensive. We have to be very careful about that. So anyways, those are the things I'd say. The crisis residential, the path, there's a path there. It's not quite as straight, I think. And then I think what we did with the MOPS was good preventative care measure, I guess.
Could I have a little clarification about, how you see things changing with design versus design build as that right?
I thought you couldn't do design build, the designer and the builder, they have to be separate because there's conflicts if they're the same. And Mark saying disagrees with me, and I have to listen to that because he's in that business. I'm a very reluctant developer of late, and I'm learning a little bit about this, but I don't have his experience. He can't make mufflers really good, and I don't know much about building really good, so I have to listen to that. I have to listen to that. If you need a muffler.
So, the Kemper report on page 40 says, our assessment of Mendocino County's current mental health service continuum is that it does not offer a robust set of alternative services that prevent crisis conditions and provide alternatives to inpatient psychiatric care. The system is heavily tilted toward responding to crisis conditions with a primary service strategy of inpatient psychiatric care in out-of-county facilities. But the one line I like the best in this whole Kemper report is this one. Measure B funding is to reduce the need for inpatient psychiatric care while simultaneously assuring that inpatient psychiatric care is available in the county when needed. And I think that speaks to what we really should be doing. And I support what the sheriff is saying, and if Sheriff Allman didn't do the work that he did, none of us would be sitting here, and for that, I personally thank you.
Amen.
I think that when I started here in 2007, we didn't talk about it, but our mental health staff actually had a 23-hour crisis stabilization, and some of you might remember that. And I remember our staff, and this might have not been legal, and I don't know, I was brand new. But I remember our mental health staff walking people around the building, and I see Camille shaking her head. So after 23 hours or 22 and a half hours, they would take somebody out, they would release them, they would walk them around the building, and after midnight, they would bring them back. And that was a 23-hour crisis stabilization unit, but it wasn't called that. And I believe that what they did, and under that mental health director at the time, that, by the way, I had a lot of problems with, because I didn't know what he was doing and I didn't understand what he was doing. But I understand today because I sit here. But what he was doing was actually keeping people in the county and keeping them out of jail and keeping them out of a 24-hour psychiatric facility. And that went away. And so where we are today, I see the only decisions are, do we jump in full boat on a 24-hour psychiatric facility? Do we look at a crisis residential? Do we look at a crisis stabilization? And when I think about what actually could support the system and keep people out of jail and keep them out of the hospital ERs and keep them out of a 24-hour psychiatric facility outside of Mendocino County, it seems to me that a crisis stabilization unit would be the #1 priority, whether it is or not for this committee. It would seem to me that we would look at that. I also think that with a 24-hour psychiatric facility, there are multiple reasons why they fail. And my understanding of why Mendocino County's 24-hour psychiatric facility failed was 1, we didn't have money, 2, we didn't have staff. I don't know why it failed. But what I do know when I read this report 4 times is that if we do not have the support services for clients, that 24-hour psychiatric facility will not survive. And whether it's because there will be no more money, or whether it was that we will not be able to get staff up here because you try to find a nurse up here, whatever, we're gonna have a tough time with that 24-hour psychiatric facility. It would seem to me that we could jump into a crisis stabilization unit, and that would provide support. Thank you. Your turn.
I think our priority, because of the outlines and the support for Measure B, was some kind of psychiatric facility. However, I think the priority should be to find out all the information we can about the different psychiatric facilities and their staffing needs, etc., before we can make an educated decision. So that would be my highest priority, would be to gather that information about psych facilities.
Thank you. Ms. Miller? Dr. Miller.
So I would say, I was here in that time, Carl, that you spoke about, that we kept people overnight on the old.
23 hours, I never said we kept them overnight.
No. Well, and sometimes they came in late, so 23 hours can be a night, right? Someone comes in at 5 o'clock at night and you keep them for 23 hours from that 5 o'clock at night. So it was, we did keep them 23 hours and we did walk them around the building sometimes.
Oh, good.
This
is all on camera.
But it was 23 hours, what I say was 23 hours, but people come in at all hours is what I say. There are people that come in at 12 o'clock needing that type of option. And I can say we did reduce hospitalizations. We had several people, by just giving them 23 hours, that we were able to stabilize and be able to send help. And that was a point where law enforcement would bring them directly to us and drop them off at the crisis unit, and we would take them and decide from there whether we were going to 5150 them or not, and bring them over to the hospital if it was safe to do so. So with that said, I think that some of my priority is really looking at a CSU, and a CRT would be my top choices. I think that prevention would be my first thing to look at. Being able to have a CSU and a or CRT would really help us and reduce some costs.
Thank you very much. Is there any public, I don't know if this wasn't really an agenda item.
It's still the same item.
It's still the same item. This is item 3E. Is there any further public comment?
Good afternoon, Camille Schrader with RQMC. I just wanted to reiterate, regardless of how it is formed or built or whatever agreements occur, the reason that the project on Orchard started and exists as a very complicated option is that education has already been done. Science research already has proven. Everyone, literally the numbers, the data, all of the information shows that for the clients, for the people suffering in the streets, for law enforcement, and for the ERs, crisis residential and crisis stabilization will reduce by a third, if not 50%. We've always said conservatively a third because we want to be conservative in the expectations. It's absolutely known that it will, and it could not work unless we had an in-county psychiatric facility so that we can move them, swiftly if they need it longer. That's known. That's the reason the project was begun and started. The reason this particular project was crisis stabilization, crisis residential, and access is for the purpose that Ms. Angelo said, which is we're going to have a tremendous issue with workforce, and you want to share workforce and share finances and share sort of the work that goes into those three components. And if they're together on the same site, you have the opportunity to be able to use your expertise where it's needed most. So I just want to be clear about that. And again, however it gets done, we just need that for our clients. So thank you.
Thank you. So moving on to measure item 3F, which is a nice segue. My intention for formulating this with the help of Ross and I spent quite a while talking about this, is with the hopes of moving forward on the crisis residential, crisis stabilization, crisis access. Although, and I don't, maybe this is one of the places where it's nice to have counsel available, but this is sort of a complicated item, being as it was already proposed. RQMS thought they had the funding and then due to a technicality lost most of it. And so that's the reason they're turning to Measure B. However, it was already approved by the Board of Supervisors. So I think that ultimately what our job is to decide whether we approve of using Measure B funding for that project. So this is where it's difficult. Now, I am not sophisticated in building. Ross is certainly a lot more than I am, and what he suggested was that we move forward with putting out an RFP for a biddable design, because we don't know, and again, this is not something I'm sophisticated in, we don't know how much this is gonna cost, and we can't really responsibly vote on it without knowing what we're talking about. That being said, I'm not 100% sure that that's in our purview. I'm just not sure, but, you know, I would, Ross does think so, and so I respect what he has to say. So, now, having had that discussion that we had, I'm not sure that this is, I mean, you yourself was suggesting maybe this is no longer the best way to go, being as it's not design build. And then the second issue is the fact that this was already planned and approved by the board. And I'm not, you know, I'm not quite sure if we could approve use of measure funding pending an acceptable bid that would probably have to depend on design, like you say, so, I'm sorry?
I was just kind of curious as
Yeah.
to what his take on it. So, even though you can put a project out for design build, you're limiting it to very few contractors, which may in this course not be the best path, because there's many local contractors that could bid this work competitively that are capable of designing and bidding it competitively. In the event of, tens of millions of dollars, you get more interest in that. In a smaller project like this, you don't. So I think in this, if we were to proceed down this path for a CSU CRT, I think sending it out for a biddable design is the right avenue to do. And then you're opening it up for anyone that wants to design a project anywhere, not just on Orchard Avenue. Does Orchard Avenue have a leg up? Absolutely. But if someone wants to build something somewhere else, then that's the way I read this. It's not specific to Orchard Avenue.
Right. Ukiah Valley.
Right. With that, in Jan's study guide here, it's one of the second most important thing that they want is a crisis stabilization and crisis residential facility in Fort Bragg. So, well, they could build it in Fort Bragg, but 25% of the population per the Kemper report comes from Fort Bragg, and 75% comes from Ukiah. So I agree wholeheartedly that we should have one over there. I don't think we can afford one, or afford two of them. And, per RQMC's design that they gave us to operate the facility, they're expecting Measure B to provide $500,000 a year in service funding. So, with that and the existing MOPS program that we've already okayed, we've spent half of the operating funds.
Mr. McCowan, would you like to make any comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. John McCowan. So with respect to the issue of design build, that's what's in front of you right now. I think Member Myrtle made an excellent suggestion that design build would probably disadvantage local contractors. So maybe it makes sense to split it, but really this is your decision. We just welcome you bringing something forward.
I'm sorry, Mr. Liberty.
So this has got a lot of arms and legs, got kind of complicated. One of the issues is that the probably the odds-on favorite for being the operator is RCS, obviously. And RCS actually owns a design, right? You guys already went down the path of doing a design. Yeah, full disclosure, we talked a little bit yesterday. So this isn't actually set up, but we did talk. They own a design. I think if the kind of odds-on favorite for being the operator has a recommended design, that should probably be something we'd want to look at, but they own the intellectual property. And so we would have to ask that be available. And as part of using that to go out for a biddable design, if we're going to use that, we can't do that without their blessing. So we have to understand that, right? And I'm not an IT attorney, but I'm pretty sure that you guys own the intellectual property and that we can't use that. And actually, Mark, you have an understanding of that, right? That they have a design, they have a rough design. Is that not available?
I don't think that's property of ours, it's theirs.
Right.
Right.
So
I
we
don't
have to
think we
get
can
their permission.
advertise with that design.
We probably have to get your permission to use it.
But I don't think we need that design. We can say, we want this many square feet with this type of rooms, this type of, and we can detail that out, that this is what we want, how much is it to design it and build it. I don't know who's gonna do that, but.
I know that's the problem. Who's gonna be able to, they've got a started design. So we have to consider that if we're gonna go out for a biddable design, and also beware again, if we ask for a biddable design, we're talking, close to $1 million for the design itself, for the paperwork.
And with that in mind, would whoever makes this motion be okay with just dropping the last 4 words in the Ukiah Valley? The motion is going to be for a building that's going to adequately serve our needs.
Yeah, probably the design, the biddable design wouldn't be really specific to a geographical area. I mean, it does change a little bit if, you have this cross street or that cross street, where you're at, but yeah, generally speaking. It's not it's your agenda item, so.
Well,
No motion yet.
It could be anywhere, right? It doesn't have to, design is not geographic specific.
But I just
Flat area.
understand, I just want to understand why would you want to do that? I mean, what does it?
The elephant in the room is there's always talk of Old Howard Hospital. And if a company said, I can design that with the Howard Foundation and I can meet your criteria, we haven't asked anybody to do that. Or if we put it out there without those words, nobody responds with Old Howard Hospital, that answers a lot of questions.
So you're talking about not a PUF unit, but a crisis residential
No.
crisis?
That's not what I'm talking. I'm talking about putting the bid out as 3F says, and not saying in the Ukiah Valley. And it would serve the purposes of what that motion, or that item is.
Okay,
So I think we had a square footage estimate on the motion, on the thing, right?
No, on the motion.
On the motion? No, you don't.
Not on the motion, we don't have a motion yet, but on the.
Agenda item now.
So,
yes, I'm sorry, Ms. McGrory,
Yeah, that's fine.
yes, I have a question regarding venue, and I know that the 2 places that we talk about over and over and over are Orchard Avenue with RCS and Howard Hospital with the Howard Foundation. But, the county has a building that used to be a hospital. This one used to be a hospital. Why are we not considering the site on Dora Street? I mean, it's already built. It was a hospital, it has large corridors, it has locked doors. Is it a potential, is it a possibility? I think we're limiting ourselves when we say, oh, we need to look at this or this.
Well, that's why I'm saying if we drop those 4 words, it could be any of those.
Yeah. So, I mean,
You
just
didn't bring it up earlier, that's why.
It's, can I respond to what she said?
Of course.
Yeah, so thank you, I thought you were directing me. But,
No.
but,
She's parliamentarian.
we did consider, the old.
Who's we? Not in this group.
Not this group, but,
Right.
but there was some consideration of the old general hospital, as a use as a crisis stabilization. And I can't remember what the issues were that directed us away from it.
Well, then it would be good to revisit it.
Yeah. Okay, well,
Also, you can get a portable and plop it on a place, which is what we were thinking for Fort Bragg, which might be a whole lot cheaper than, hiring an individual design firm and building or constructing it.
all right, Ms. Angela?
So, with all due respect to this committee that I sit on, and all due respect to my great friend and colleague, Member Liberty, we're back, we're so into the weeds, we can't make a decision. We are so into the weeds. And, I realize because we have some really competent fiscal people on this committee who really want to watch the money, because that is the number one job of this committee, is watching the Measure B funds, how they're spent, and that we're good stewards of the public's money. But I guess when I look at this, and we've been all through this, and it's biddable design, and then you talk about $1 million for a biddable design and all this, was the decision made? Was there a decision made that we even want to start with a crisis residential and crisis stabilization? I mean, right now we're talking about a biddable design. And so I guess what I would another approach, which really may not be what this committee wants to do, but another approach is that you make a recommendation to the board that they move forward, that the Measure B committee wants the board to move forward with the research, whatever you want to call it, with a crisis stabilization and a crisis residential unit. And then we get into a county contracting and purchasing process. And my deputy is here who can speak to that. But, I think we're gonna sit here, it's 2:45. We're gonna sit here and we're gonna go back and forth with this biddable design, and I don't know that we're gonna make a decision. And I don't know that this committee has even made a decision that you even wanna move forward with crisis stabilization or crisis residential. So, so I have a real issue with that. It's like, what do we want to move forward with? And if it is crisis stabilization and crisis residential, then why can't the Measure B committee just make a recommendation to the board to move forward with those two services?
I very much appreciate your comment, and this is my intent. I would like to move forward as fast as possible and to expedite the facility on Orchard Avenue. And as I said, the board had already approved it, so if we can commission the board make a recommendation to the board to proceed with an acceptable facility, I'm all for that. And in that, and I know that's not the agenda item, so I would, yeah.
That's
okay.
I thought you wanted no? Okay.
We're in the weeds.
I thought-
Let's not stay there, please.
No, I apologize, I'm incorrect.
That's okay.
I'm just listening intently.
Okay,
So-
you look like you wanted to speak, sorry.
She did.
If there's a more expeditious pathway to proceeding with this, that's what I would be for. And in the service of that, I would withdraw my agenda item if I can do that. And no, so.
No, there's no motion.
We don't have to have a, we haven't had a motion. You don't-
No,
yeah.
but, okay, so I would, then would you like to make a motion?
Me?
No.
So, under usual circumstances, this was yours.
Yes.
I'm thinking it was
Yes,
Ross's.
otherwise it would be the presenter.
I will make a motion. I don't know if it's gonna go anywhere, but I will make a motion. I'm gonna revise this to say, that the Measure B committee makes a recommendation to the Mendocino County Board of Supervisors to explore utilizing Measure B funds for the development of a crisis stabilization and crisis residential unit.
Okay, I second, if I can.
He says when I go, he says when I go.
What's that? Yeah, well, exactly.
Well, you have to.
And please be aware that the motion that I made is that we recommend to the board, because it's the board that makes the decision, it's
Right.
not us.
Right.
That we recommend to the board that they begin the process of researching, doing a crisis stabilization and a crisis residential unit. I mean, that's all we're recommending. And we're basically saying that those are top priorities for Measure B services.
Which was demonstrated by the around the room, but.
And now it's,
Yes,
you're gonna go around again and.
So
God
is
knows
there
what we're
any,
gonna
is there any weight carried by the fact that the board already approved the project?
Only if it's something that the Measure B committee members appreciate or not.
Okay, all right. And I don't know, Ms. Elliott, if you have any comment or not?
There's a lot of pens up.
You need a second.
No, we had a second.
He seconded it.
Can he second it as the
No,
chair?
that's what I was going to say, as a point of order, you need to pass the gavel to your vice chair in order to second that motion. Would you like to do that?
I second.
Okay.
Great. Is there any discussion?
Okay, please, I think.
I got pins, I got
Actually, they're before
pins,
me.
so
I got
when,
pins.
so point of order also, once you pass the gavel.
She's now the chair.
I'm now the chair.
Thanks
a lot.
No, I'm learning,
You lost your gavel.
You had your pen up, sir.
So, I do agree that crisis stabilization, crisis residential treatment is 100% necessary. I'm in support of researching, the financial costs of building that to see if that fits into my mission of affording everything. So I am in total support of that, and the stakeholders that I represent absolutely 100% say we need crisis stabilization and crisis residential treatment. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Mr. Liberty, or were you, I didn't pay attention to who was up first, because I didn't know I was gonna be chair. Mr. Liberty, it's your turn to talk.
Yeah, I'm just a little curious, what could possibly have been approved if the board approved something? I want to get my head around that, so we're gonna make a recommendation to the board, but it's just gonna say, we want this a crisis residential center someplace. That's as broad, that's how broad our recommendation is right now. And if there was something that was approved, I can't even imagine what that could be. Because if there was something approved, there was an estimate on the table. There was an estimate, there wasn't a biddable design, there was an estimate. I can't imagine they approved that.
Do you mind if I ask for clarification from our
It could go
supervisor?
2x. It could
You
go
don't,
2x.
you don't wanna clarify? Okay. Oh, wait, see, I knew I'd get him up there.
Well, that I'm not on the board
Really,
with.
it's your role to make the recommendations. I think as much detail as you can add would be appreciated by the board, because I do believe that's what we're looking for, but really it's for this board to make the recommendations that you're comfortable making.
Do you mind just clarifying my understanding, and you can just tell me if this is correct, is that the board approved the building on Orchard Avenue by our RQMS in the past.
The board supported a grant application is my recollection. So that was not funded. It's in the packet apparently, and am I getting the gist of it? And so, but that ship has sailed as of now, I believe. Otherwise, you wouldn't need to discuss this. It'd be out there presumably getting built. I think the motion is very broad, and it doesn't provide a lot of guidance for the Board of Supervisors. But, I don't want to be in the position of telling you what to do.
So I was
Yeah,
going to ask
okay.
a comment.
Jen.
if you want.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Miss
Tammy? Please.
Tammy Moss Chandler, Director of Health and Human Services. Just to further add to Supervisor McCowan's comments, in your board packet today is actually the history of all the Board of Supervisors approvals. What you'll see in those agenda summaries that are attached is what Supervisor McCowan stated, that there was an application that started several years ago to the state of California It's referenced as both Senate Bill 82, which is the same as the Mental Health Wellness Act of 2013. And that funding is actually provided through an organization called CHFFA at the state level. And you can actually go online and see the agreements that tie to this. It was an agreement to give the initial funding with the expectation that additional funding would be leveraged. That actual funding to purchase the land on Orchard Street for $380,000 was completed between the county and Redwood Community Services, RCS, in the spring of 2017, with an expectation over the next 12 months, which would have been by June 2018, that additional funding sources would be secured for that building. There was actually a CDBG application that went forward and was not successfully awarded. There was discussion of USDA loan funding that didn't move forward. So that's why we're here today. All that's been secured is the purchase of a piece of land on Orchard for $380,000. And the remaining strategy to build is currently in limbo, if you will. And so that's all that's been done. There's no building, there's no facility started. There was some initial work put in to put it forward, the CDBG proposal, and I'm sure Dan Anderson could add to that, but that's where the county is today.
Thank you. Jan?
I'm still chair. Your motion's on the floor.
Oh man, you watch out for Donnie, you guys put it in. I like that it's vague so that we have the opportunity to look at other venues, because I know there's a lot of pressure on Orchard Avenue, but I think unless we look at all the options, we're not doing a good job.
Shannon.
Just a clarifying question. Do we know if there are covenant restrictions on the Orchard Avenue property associated with a crisis residential treatment?
Through the chair, was now Ms.
Yeah.
So Dan Anderson is with Redwood Community Services, and currently we are working through the deed and grant processes with the state, and he can speak further to what the covenants are.
That's it.
Yeah, there aren't any current covenants that we're aware of.
But we do,
Yes, sorry, Dan.
Dan Anderson with RCS. We are in the process of establishing a lease agreement with encumbrances on the property. But depending on where this goes, there are timelines on that. So we may need to shift, if it goes somewhere else, which is fine. But that probably is the most significant, thing. But it's not actually formal. It's in our agreement with CHAPA.
And that agreement with CHAPA, the state organization, has not been executed to date.
Mr. Liberty? You can tell.
Oh, shit.
I'd like to revise my motion. Can I say what I'd like to revise it to?
Please.
That was good, Carla.
This is for Supervisor McCown. So, the motion was, could you read the original motion, please?
Yes, the motion was that Measure B committee make a recommendation to the Mendocino County Board of Supervisors to explore utilizing Measure B funds for the development of a crisis stabilization and crisis residential facility.
Further, that the Board of Supervisors direct staff to research options associated with the development of said facility, including design, build, design, bid, build, and potential property or facility locations. Now, if that isn't governmental speak, I don't know what is.
I'm sorry.
But basically, I'll send it to you. But basically what I'm saying is that I believe the motion should be broad, because I think it gives the board a lot of opportunity to determine how they want to move forward. And knowing this Board of Supervisors, they will send it back to Measure B at least once to review. But in light of that, to have more clarification, should this committee want more clarification to vote on this recommendation, it would be further to direct staff to research options associated with the development of said facility, including design / build / bid, and potential property or facility locations.
I second.
Wait, no, wait. Hold your
Do you want me to
pen
send it to you?
Yeah, I have, including design / build / bid, if you could repeat from there, please.
design/bid/build and potential property or facility locations. So basically, the thing is that, I didn't say this in our motion, but what would happen is, when this went to the board, if the board decided to direct staff, this is everything we would do. I just didn't spell it out. This is everything we would do. But
Do I have a second?
Second.
So actually, the original seconder has to agree to the amendment, yes, thank you.
You're correct. Sorry, my bad. And you're still not chair. Do I have any other further discussion? Public comment?
I have some.
Put your pens up.
So this specifically speaks to the CRT and the CSU together at this. I'm assuming it's speaking to those two because of the initial agreements that the county had entered into, and it works good to have those two together. However, we're leaving off other facilities, we're leaving off a PUF, we're leaving off a training facility. Are we limiting ourselves by not maybe bidding this as one facility, large facility, or in the same area by just narrowing it down to these two, the CRT and the CSR?
Mr. Liberty, you are next.
So it just seems to me that we're just abdicating our duty to make recommendations to the board. We're saying we're giving this very broad, we think you guys should do something about mental health. That's essentially as broad as we're talking about right now, instead of saying, here, this is how we should specifically apply this. And I'm thinking that the voters expected us to do more, give more specific recommendations in that.
Yeah, but you want
No,
to.
I should. Do
you want to defer?
I'll defer to Ms. Angelo until she answers.
As the maker of the motion, what I would like to say is, it was only 30 minutes ago that what we did is the suggestion by Supervisor Haschak and then Supervisor McCowan was to go around the room and for each member just to say what our top item was. That was after this committee voted, one, to use the Kemper report as a guideline, and then decided that we had all gone through the recommendations, so we weren't going to go through the recommendations. So we each went around and said what we thought our top priorities were. I said my top priority was crisis stabilization. So as the maker of this motion has to do with crisis stabilization and crisis residential, as in my mind being the top two. It doesn't have to be in your mind, but to me, I think they're the top two. So I just wanted to speak to that. And as far as packaging everything up and delivering one RFP for a 24-hour psychiatric facility, crisis stabilization, crisis residential, I'm not certain how we would do that. If we did that as one RFP, it would have to be 3 separate RFPs or 3 separate statements of work in one. Because I really can't imagine that someone who is going to bid on a 24-hour psychiatric facility is going to bid on a residential program and also crisis stabilization. So we have a lot of services here, and I'll just remind this committee that it's after 3 o'clock. Thank you.
3:30 roll.
So,
I think that's perfectly legit from our discussion that we're talking about crisis stabilization, crisis residential. And I understand that we talk PUF as though it's the only option, but we haven't really defined what PUF is, and this is the one that's needed the most. So I don't see that this is being irrelevant, and I also don't see it as being, oh, this is, the general mental health thing. This is specific.
Also, I'd like to bring up Also, I'd like to bring up the fact. Well, there are several things. First of all, I know the committee did not consider the current facility on Dora Street that used to be the general hospital, but when a number of us considered it, the idea was of both crisis stabilization and crisis residential. The second thing is that crisis stabilization and crisis residential work together. You know, it's not like they're just two separate things in the same building, you know, and the idea is hopefully that when somebody's stabilized, you know, maybe overnight in the emergency room and then in a locked facility, that they'd be able to stay in the same facility without having to move, that they're stable enough on medications or through some counseling that they could stay in the crisis facility, that being crisis residential, without being locked. So that the two being in one building serves utility, not just happening to be in the same facility. That's all I have.
Mr. Liberty, do you want to speak again, or do you always like to keep
I
your
just always
hand up?
forget to knock it down.
Mr. Almond.
I just want to respond to Ross and saying, you know, as the oversight committee, I think that the voters realize that the board of supervisors may not have the last bite of the apple. We're asking the board of supervisors to approve this, to establish the RFP, and then if they are going to misspend the funds from Measure B, then that's when the commission would say we're the oversight and we don't believe the board of supervisors is expending the money correctly. So the voters, this would be perfectly okay, in my opinion, to send to the board of supervisors, and then we would watch with care and caution of how they proceed with it.
Ms. Riley?
Oh, I'd just like to say that I support the motion. I appreciate Ross's concerns about it seeming very general. I kind of believe the opposite. I think it's actually very specific, and it doesn't limit us to one specific project, one operator, one property. And so I appreciate that there would be staff with some expertise doing the due diligence that will really help guide this committee in making an informed decision down the road.
Thank you. Anybody else? Your pen's up. Was your pen up for a reason?
Used to be.
Okay, any public comment? Hearing none, can I call?
I'm just kidding.
Oh, it's Dan. You don't look there.
Thank you, Dan. Dan Anderson with RCS. I appreciate the complexity and difficulty of this. I empathize and have great respect for, you know, kind of how you guys are trying to figure this out. I just want to respond to a comment that Ross said earlier about the intellectual property and the work that RCS has put into this to date. Our priority, RCS and RQMC, is to get the service out to our community and our clients and to Mendocino County. You know, we have invested a lot of money in this, but it's what we do. And so I don't think we have a problem in terms of supporting, sharing, you know, the work that we've done in terms of design, integrating that. I just want the commission to know. And we're also, we've said it before, and I'm just reiterating again, you know, the money that purchased the orchard property is a CHAFA grant that we would put together with the county. We really don't have a problem with saying, you know, take the property back and you know, let's do this together. So that's, I mean, one of the, I think, surprising things that has happened here over the last few years is the level of partnering that's happening between public and private involving RCS, involving RQMC in the county. So I guess I just want to, you know, everybody doesn't need to be worried about, you know, will we work together? Will we support? Will we do whatever needs done here to somehow, you know, bring this service to our community? That's what's important, not necessarily who owns or who gets what, and whatever way we can do to support that. That's what we're going to do. So thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Sorry, Dan. Thank you, Tammy Moss Chandler, Director of Health and Human Services. I know your time is getting short, but I just wanted to speak briefly to the comments that were made about adding the psychiatric health facility to this plan. As a Health and Human Services Director who's worked in 4 different counties, I've worked in a county that had a CSU connected to a PUF. I've worked in a county that's had a CSU connected to a CRT in the same building. I've worked in a county that had all 3 on the same campus and facility. So I think all of those are viable designs, and I just want to welcome that those 3 things I know are the top 3 priorities I've heard your committee talk about today: a psychiatric health facility, a crisis stabilization unit, and a crisis residential treatment center. And I think there's real viability if that recommendation came from this group to the Board of Supervisors for them to do research to help get to the next steps.
Thank you. Any other further public comment? Anybody? Your pen's not up, ma'am.
That's because I packed up to leave.
Yeah,
That's why. I would be Chairman Moschetti, in light of our Health and Human Services Director's comments and also Member Lloyd's concern, which is a good one, I actually am willing to amend my motion.
Again.
Yes.
Okay, no, this is good.
Yeah, it's perfect. I'm fine with that.
To add, Carla, just add one phrase, 24-hour psychiatric facility. So it would be crisis stabilization, crisis residential, and a 24-hour psychiatric facility. So we would be moving all three services forward to the board with our recommendation that they begin the process of researching cost, location, service, whatever. So it'd be all three.
Are you okay with that?
My only concern is, if PUF is, subject to the state regulatory commission, I would hate to see everything delayed for 6 years. That's my only concern.
So based on what I said when Lloyd brought up a very good comment, is that we could do a request for proposal, request for information, request for bid, whatever the board directs us to do, we could do it all as three separate statement of work. And what could happen is the information comes back and it shows that 24-hour psychiatric facility is going to take 18 months due to state regulations. Crisis stabilization may take 4 months, resident, who knows. So I think if we approach it like that, I think we could send all three services to the board.
I approve.
So are you seconding?
I second.
Shall I repeat it before we vote?
Please.
Yes. All right, so the final amended is, Measure B Committee makes recommendation to the Mendocino County Board of Supervisors to explore utilizing Measure B funds for the development of a crisis stabilization and crisis residential facility and a 24-hour psychiatric facility. Further, that the Board of Supervisors direct staff to research options associated with such facility, including bid/build, and potential property or facility locations. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct.
Do I have any further comment, questions? I will call for the vote. Please, Carla.
Member Diamond.
Yes.
Sheriff Almond.
Aye.
Member Riley.
Yes.
Member Myrtle.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Moschetti. I will get that right, I swear.
You will, no
Okay.
problem. Yes.
Chair Brash.
Yes.
Auditor Weir.
Yes.
Member Liberty.
Oh, sure.
You're going.
I'll take that as a yes. CEO Angelo.
Yes.
Member McGorty.
Yes.
Dr. Miller.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
And I pass the gavel back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any public comment?
No, we already commented. We already had public comment.
I move we adjourn.
Do you want to do the reports or just?
Let's take
Oh, you guys.
Bang your gavel.
Order.
Bang your gavel.
I heard a lot about.
Is that an adjournment?
4A, no, he recalled that.
We're still here?
4A, committee member reports.
Committee member reports. Which step, do you want to start?
I move that we, not do committee reports.
Everybody say no report, that's it.
That's it, just say no report.
None reported.
Nothing at all.
I'm gonna talk to us.
None? I move that we adjourn.
Okay.
No, we don't, all right. So.
Carla, do we have our best with you?
Yes, I will pick up everything.
Great job.
You're gonna get that.